Welcome back to all our listeners to another week of Taking Inventory. I'm Daniel Druger here with James Barrow. James, we're going to do a little bit of a different episode this week. We've got no guests. It's just you and I, but we're going to take a retrospective of 2023 where we launched this podcast. We're 37 episodes in. I think there's a lot to talk about what went on over the year.
Yeah. I can never tell if I like these style of episodes or not. So hopefully we do a good job with this one. When they're good, they don't suck. When they suck, they suck. So let's try to make this one not suck.
Let's try. And if anyone listening, has that feedback, feel free to send us a DM. Say that one sucked. Don't do that again. We're open to that. So anyway, James, why don't we start off with kind of the easy intro in is, we had a number of guests this year ranging from all kinds of different companies, backgrounds. What were maybe your top 3 episodes that we did this year?
Yeah, I would say in no order. It's like my kids. I love them all equally. But I would say one of my favorite ones was episode 15 with Connor McKenna, who's a partner at Luma Partners. I think given like our time at Snap and then also just, our experience selling Shift back in the day, like getting kind of an under the kind of hood look at how like media investment banking works, I thought was super interesting. I learned a lot from him and kind of his perspective and also just like how like that interplays with corp dev teams, which obviously we worked with a lot in particular at Snap. So that was super cool to kind of get a little bit of like under the hood there. James Avery was kind of like our third amigo all year. He was on a bunch of episodes. I love Avery. I think what he's building at Kevel is awesome. And so I think anytime we had Avery on, I thought I learned a lot. He's sort of like the open web version of us. And so, I think that was a super interesting perspective. Jessica Yellen, who kind of taught us everything about how media and politics and the news works. Thought that was fascinating. Actually, I really like a lot of our episodes, to be honest. I think, definitely the Marketecture guys having us on their podcast, they were like our inspiration to do this. And I thought that was just like a really kind of almost like a good debate, again, kind of from 2 different angles. And then I'd say like probably my favorite one had to be Ali Kashani, Serve Robotics. Like the fact that the fact that he came on the podcast in general, given everything he's done at Uber and Postmates, but also just the fact that he is using, basically advertising to subsidize, autonomous self-driving robots to like save our cities and to decouple our reliance on foreign supply chains. That was pretty cool. So I think those were the big ones kind of stuck out in my head. But I really am just like shocked and thankful that we had all these amazing people come on. It really, looking at the episode list, makes you realize like how much time people took out of their days to do this with us. So if any of you guys are listening, thank you again for doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I think all those episodes were certainly up there for me. I think the ones that I had the most fun with, I think, were the ones there where it was just a topic that I either thought I knew something about and very quickly realized I was not knowledgeable at all, or something that just was completely out of my depth. So I think my favorites were Oren Schaubel, which, funny enough, we had went to high school together, but just hearing his take on the creator economy and how these B2B creators are starting to come up and really gain some power on the platforms, in the ads ecosystem, the really niche creators. I mean, he's got 100,000 followers. The amount he's charging for posts is ridiculous on a per follower basis. And his take on just how the creator economy, creator commerce is going to evolve was like fascinating to me. And the other one was,
I thought on that one, I thought just on those lines on that one, Oren explained to us that the creators like have a group chat where they're like almost kind of like quasi organizing about like how to charge advertisers, all that whole dynamic of kind of under the hood. I thought that was fascinating. And I don't think very few people, especially us, had no idea it had gotten to that level of sophistication.
Yeah. I wonder how many of those there are, because obviously those guys are sophisticated, but there's so many of these lifestyle creators and more on the consumer side that, yeah, I'm sure they all talk and share notes. And yeah, the platforms have no idea that this is going on and to what extent. Yeah, so that's a good call out. And then the other episode that I really enjoyed, and part of it was because I came from a TV background when I started my career, but was Peter Hamilton. And again, that was one episode I thought coming in we would be a little knowledgeable because it's CTV, it's within the ad space. He came from mobile advertising, which we know some about. And then as he started diving into what Roku's real vision was and how they're rev sharing on all of this inventory that they don't even own, that they're essentially just co-opting from partners, and then all of kind of the partnership landscape that they're building out with different measurement partners, different retail partners, and helping connect the dots from people viewing content to purchasing things in store online. That one like blew my mind because I went in just thinking, oh, it's like TV, it's just a new way of TV, and there's ads. And he totally
Yeah,
shattered that perspective.
yeah, I agree. I think like if you haven't listened to that podcast, I thought the main takeaway, which I actually think about like a lot, just in the context of like some of these businesses, is that Peter was like Roku is an OS, and that's like it's purely an operating system. It's not like an app. It's not necessarily, even though they create some content, that's almost just like proof of concept. And so if you start to think about it as an operating system, and then you start to think about like as the OS, like some OSs take rev share on transactions, other OSs in their case basically are taking inventory that they can go ahead and sell ads against. It made me think Roku is honestly a way more interesting business than I had thought it was.
Yeah, totally.
So totally agree. I thought that one was cool.
Like you said, we had a killer roster of people that took the time, came on, and shared their knowledge. I think the two that probably got the most feedback was Eric Seufert and Andrew Cavato, which to me just underpin that like people don't understand measurement, they want to understand it, and people don't understand all of the changes that like Apple and Google and regulators are making on the industry. And like those two guys just broke it down. So by listens and by feedback, those two I think were the most popular.
Yeah, no, I mean, super. Well, Cavato is brilliant, and I thought he really kind of jump started us getting honestly a lot of guests on. I think he was one of our first guests, if
Yeah,
not the first guest. Uh, and then Sufert, he's like the needle. It's amazing how much the views. I mean, in terms of listens and interaction that his podcast got, it's shocking, and it's a testament to both of those guys about like the brands they're building themselves. Obviously, Sufert's been doing that more, for longer. Cavato has recently just started doing that. He's got his Growth by Science consulting firm. Like, I think a year from now, the two of them are going to, I don't know anyone smarter in this
yeah,
space when it comes to measurement where things are going to those guys. So I agree that those ones, from like a pure industry perspective in particular, like, you could re-listen to those, I think 6 months from now, and there's probably still value there.
yeah.
So that's a way of saying I thought we crushed those by
I
getting
think
them on
I
there.
think off topic a little with Super is it makes me realize how much content and how much time and effort and thought he puts into his stuff. I mean, he's putting blog posts and analyst piece out almost daily. You and I have been doing this podcast weekly. We've done newsletters. That's work, and for him to do it consistently and at a high bar is like wild to me.
Yeah, well, and if anyone has subscribed to our newsletter, please do. We haven't sent one out in a while, but the reason we haven't is because it's really hard. And Daniel had a kid, and Daniel's just a much better writer than me, and so I like ended up just being like, this is not going to be useful to send out. But again, it's a testament to Sufert and the quality of the content, the thoughtfulness, and then also the volume is impressive, and like well deserved. How much respect that guy has.
Yeah. So changing gears maybe a little bit, looking back 2023, just everything that took place in the industry and media in the world, what were your biggest surprises that you saw play out?
That's a good question. Biggest surprises. I think. I mean, this is sort of naive, but like, I'm shocked TikTok hasn't gotten shut down. Like that one, you know, I think most people know something isn't right there, and they can kind of feel it, and everyone kind of at this point, I almost think it's kind of in the zeitgeist, like they all know it. So I think that one, you know, that's surprising, and I think just given that, like, there's an election year coming up, I doubt it's getting shut down next year. So that was pretty surprising that it survived 2023, just given all the things that had taken place. I mean, you forget about like the spy balloon and all this stuff. I mean, there's like a lot of things that have happened that you would expect maybe TikTok to get shut down, and also it got shut down in India, and India was fine and no one cared. So I think that one was very surprising. Um, I think maybe one surprising just in a good way, and I think it's really cool to see is Uber, like how well that team has appeared to execute in terms of an ads business, how big that business can be. I think that has just been like invigorating, I think, to a lot of other businesses because you start to actually see how these sort of tangential ads businesses can be formed. Obviously, on Serve Robotics, we kind of got a little bit of under the hood of how, ads can really subsidize the delivery and sort of almost like ride sharing. So I think that one is awesome to see, and just, I think just like is going to open up a whole kind of other playing field. And then, maybe the other surprise, to some extent, I guess, like the Trade Desk, like, you have to give them credit. We talk about them all the time. It keeps on, executing really well. There's obviously just a ton of value that they're able to show to the market that that leads to the valuation they have. But I do think, and I've like tweeted about this, it is like surprising still that there are companies that own their own inventory that have a massive amount of that inventory that are under monetized, and they are worth less than, basically a, execution layer, which in some ways, I think you could probably put the Trade Desk in. So yeah, those are kind of my big ones.
Yeah, no, those are good. I think in a similar vein, I think just like kind of what's old is new again. Just ads are back in vogue. Ad tech, the number of platforms that are embracing ads to subsidize core services, even CTV. I mean, you look at it, it's a new technology, but the consumer engagement is exactly the same. Somebody's watching content and they're just stuffing ads in there. And the fact that Netflix now is making that just such a core part of their business, that Amazon Prime is going to start putting ads in, even though you're a subscriber. All of these businesses, I think, are realizing that just the power of ads from a margin perspective, from a partnership perspective, that is just huge to me. Just that like is a resurgence of advertising again, and there's just so many new platforms coming out or people trying to become a new platform. um, I think maybe again tangentially to that, I was surprised by how quickly I think retail media rose and then almost instantly has kind of quieted down. That retail media was the next bastion for ads growth and acceleration of the business and new monetization opportunities. And then almost overnight, expectations were tempered, and it was like, well, Amazon's got it, Walmart's got it, Uber's got it, Instacart to some extent. Everyone else is trying to figure it out, right? And I think the Marketecture guys have talked about, other people have talked about, but like when you start looking at Best Buy's got an ads business, 7-Eleven's got an ads business, Sephora's got an ads business. I mean, at some point, I think people realize that like not everyone can do this, or not everyone can do this independently. And so I think what James at Kevel's doing is kind of interesting as that trough of disillusionment happens. And so that was a surprise to me, just kind of how quickly perception changed. And then I think the last one for me, big surprise, was just how much cross-platform like collaboration there was. Yeah, I think when we were at Snap, a lot of it was everyone wanted to be a walled garden and kind of close off and own the experience, own the data, and really have leverage in partnerships. And you look at some of the partnerships that Roku has put in place, that even the Trade Desk has put in place, that some of the CTV players have put in place. It, at least from the outside, it looks like true collaboration and a true partnership where data is being exchanged. hopefully in a privacy safe manner, but where both parties can benefit from it, where it actually increases the value and the services of both companies without competing against one another. And so that was a surprise to me because I didn't know that would happen so quickly and so broadly. So I'm curious if that keeps on in 2024.
Yeah, that one kind of ironically bums me out only because it makes me think back to our Snap days and some of the kind of crazy partnerships that we were trying to pull together that just like didn't, it wasn't like the right time to do. Like, obviously, the one that I think me and you spent the most time thinking about was like a kind of a tier two ad network where, Pinterest and Snap and Reddit and all these kind of subscale walled gardens could actually kind of work together and build almost like a cross platform ads API ecosystem. And that feels way more doable now than ever. And so I think that's really cool. I don't know if it's going to be like a Snap that leads the charge on that, or if it's someone more like a Shopify who doesn't have their own pure ads business. But I do think, uh, you know, the the willingness for these companies to partner together as they're trying to go ahead and basically just like lower OpEx, right? I mean, like basically, I think when money was really cheap, you could do everything yourself, and now that money isn't as cheap, you can't do everything yourself, so you're more willing to work with people. I mean, it's kind of, I guess, kind of like obvious it's playing out that way if you think about it, but I think it's going to lead to some really really cool things, and I'm pumped to see it. I think the Snap Amazon thing is going to be big. Obviously, the Meta Amazon thing is big. Shopify Amazon stuff is big. You know, everything that Roku is doing, now that we now know it's a operating system, you sort of step back and be like, wow, this thing's huge. And then the wild card, that like hasn't happened yet, but will at one point, is Apple. And like as Apple sort of determines that it's going to be the operating system and could play a lot of the hands that Roku is playing, I think you see a whole other set of ecosystem kind of dynamics play out that are going to be pretty interesting. So I agree, that was surprising, but I think it's very cool. And I think there's just a lot of cool stuff that can happen with it.
Going back to the Apple stuff, do you think next year is the year Apple really commits to this, or is that 2 years out? Like, what do you think happens this coming year?
Yeah, I mean, it's arbitrary. Like I know, when it comes to Apple, we've obviously, we've had friends that worked there in the past, and they've said that like Apple thinks in like decade long kind of sprints. It's not like Snap where you're like trying to like ship something next week. So you know, it's hard to it's hard to time a company that it's hard to time things for a company that really has no timing pressure, just given the state of their balance sheet and their market dynamics. But I do think, given all the ad supported CTV products that are coming to market, given Apple TV, given Apple Music, given Apple Maps, given the kind of focus they have on privacy and the fact that they have the App Store and they have Apple Pay, right, and all these payments, which obviously can be used for a whole host of attribution solutions. Like I think, yeah, I'll say I'll take I think they start their march next year, and I think over time they've set up this really interesting regulatory kind of playbook where they can be like, they almost can like deconstruct the app store. So like right now they take this tax on the app store, but they can basically lower that tax to like almost nothing, become like an ads or search oriented business, but require Apple Pay as the payment solution if you want to go ahead and have optimization against it, if you want to have certain ad products actually work similar to how Meta's done it. And that could just be a massive business. And so yeah, I think, yeah, stake in the ground. Apple's going to start to show that they're going to build a massive ads business, and uh, and I think at the same time make things even confuse regulators by pulling away one of the main friction points that regulators have against them right now.
Yeah. Okay. That's a big prediction. Listeners heard it here first. Then that Apple's going to do it. What else you got for us, James?
I think that Shopify is going to start to like inject themselves more into sort of the ads kind of ecosystem. They're like the one that no one's thinking about still to some extent. But like if you are a scaled ads business that is trying to, if you're a business that has a bunch of like Fortune, call it 1,000 advertisers, and you're trying to go down market, to mid market or SMB, there's basically only one real place that has enough demand aggregation to be kind of important to you, and that is Shopify. And the way that I've actually been thinking about this a lot is that, if you think just about kind of customer acquisition costs and how it works for an ad platform, you have like the big brand stuff is, obviously sales teams and kind of, I would say more novel new ad products tend to do well kind of with those brands. They may just be more awareness oriented. And then you get into, let's go to the bottom, like the SMBs, sort of like the tail. And the only time that you can actually aggregate a ton of that is that if you have like a natural place for a business to be on your ad platform. And so you can look at Facebook and Facebook pages, Instagram pages, TikTok. I think probably is going to do a good job with that because it makes sense for businesses to be on TikTok. Uber makes sense businesses to be on there because they're merchants on there. Snapchat, for example, right? Just like there's never really a reason why businesses should be on that platform. And so I think that's why like the tail never really was able to form. But for someone like Snapchat, the torso is sitting there at Shopify. And so I think you'll see in 2024, people understand Shopify is really important and they basically can control sort of the torso of at least e-commerce. And I think people will start to think about them more as an ads and payments business and less necessarily as an e-com business, which I think is just going to be fascinating. And again, it's another one of those things where like, I think there's a ton of things they can do on the partnership side that can be extremely impactful.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I think we've talked to so many people on this podcast. Everyone is trying to capture mid market and the long tail, and we're obviously huge advocates of that, especially coming from Snap, where that was kind of what we set out to do, and I think successfully did it. But I do think, next year is probably the year where whether Shopify or somebody else, they kind of crack into crack away some of the percentage share from Amazon, Facebook, and Google and start to compete. I think a lot of people think that was going to be CTV. My prediction is like CTV is going to continue to grow, continue to do very well, but I think it's going to keep being a big brand play. I mean, I think if you look at the revenue split and growth of linear and CTV, linear is pretty flat, slightly decline. I think CTV is capturing a lot of that growth. But I don't think 2024 is the year where like CTV captures mid-market. I think, retail media as a broad term in industry captures some of mid-market, but just by nature of like a lot of the mid-market brands, if they're selling physical goods, they're trying to go omni-channel. And so they're, I think, going to be forced into paying some kind of tax to be participants in the retail media side of a business. So I like your prediction that it's Shopify, because I think a lot of people look and we talk about it being potentially CTV, potentially retail media, maybe even open web. I don't see any of those three really capturing it. I think Shopify does it. I think we've seen TikTok do it. And I think it continues to be this like social commerce, or if you own the payments part of it, you're going to have a leg up.
Yeah, man, no, I agree. I think it's like we've said a lot, sort of payments are the new cookies, and that's going to flow down to everything. And speaking of our newsletter, that was one of the newsletter write-ups we did before you had your kid that I thought was pretty good. So if you haven't read that, people should check that out. But I totally agree.
All right. I think we've hit kind of the expected topics from one of these end of year retrospectives. But I do want to take it in a little bit of a different direction. James, let's look at something that could potentially happen in 2024. Probably won't, but like a prediction that's just so off the wall that you think could just change things so dramatically if it does happen. Like make just some wild prediction for us.
It's interesting. As you were saying, this isn't that wild. The wild one would have been like, what would be interesting for like the future of our podcast is if we had like presidential like nominees on here. That would be really
Love
bizarre.
that. If anyone's running and wants to get on taking inventory, let us know.
Talk about your ad strategy. But I think big ones. I mean, I don't think this is that crazy. Maybe it is. I still think Elon has. I think he's a bad messenger, but he has the right strategy. It appears if he has the right strategy going into place for that business in terms of X, and I think you can see a world where that becomes a logical place for a business to have uh, a profile, which a lot of them do today. So I think like customer service, payments, ecom makes a lot of sense for them. And I think if you can get businesses to have a natural spot on your platform, you can turn that into a long tail ads business. It's kind of what I was saying earlier. Like you cannot the CAC math doesn't work if you have to get a business on your platform if they're not there organically. So I think Elon has still a really great hand to play. And I think that could be a really, really big ads business. So I don't know if that would shock the world, but that would be, I think, shocking given kind of how big of a mess it was this year. And then I think, you know, the other one, which I don't think this is that shocking, really, it's kind of lame to say it, but I think I'm actually thinking about it a lot too, is just like, I think people are going to start to understand that Meta like is an AI company. And I think like the Meta AI assistant, if you've seen any of these reviews of the Meta Ray-Bans, people say it's awesome. I haven't played with it yet. I want to get a pair. Actually, shout out to Shahar, who we worked with at Snap, who's overseeing marketing, I think, for that product and doing like an incredible job. But I think people's point of view on Meta and like how they interact with it is going to change dramatically. And right now, people still don't really think of them as like really as an OpenAI Google competitor. I think for like the first time, like yet it's like back in the day we'd always talk when we worked with Facebook really close or Meta. They were always like there's search and then there's discovery, and like search is Google, and Meta properties were discovery. This is the first time where like they can be an incredibly powerful search tool, and if you played around with X slash Twitter's Grok, you can start to understand how interesting it is to like talk directly to a network of basically UGC content, and there's no one who has a broader kind of scope of that in the world than the Meta Instagram, WhatsApp, you know, sort of family of apps, and Facebook. So yeah, I think that's a big one. I think Meta's gonna like. I think that thing's a rocket ship. I mean, it's obviously gigantic already, but I don't think it's even kind of gotten close to how big it can be. So those are kind of my two big ones.
Nice. I like that. A rocket ship becoming a bigger rocket ship. I'm all on board for that. Um, I think my big kind of crazy prediction is that Amazon sellers start to rebel against Amazon for the first time in the company's history. We're going to see a group of sellers start to kind of collaborate to push back on Amazon's higher fees, their forced advertising, just the behemoth that Amazon is and the pressure that they currently have on all the sellers on the platform. I think sellers are starting to get more leverage. I think we're going to start to see them pulling products from Amazon. I think it's still going to be a brand discovery tool, but then once you discover the brand, they're going to retarget you elsewhere. They're going to push you to direct shops. They're going to push you to Instagram shops. They're going to push you in store. I think this is going to be the first time we see that Amazon's marketplace business, at least for brands, is going to really take a hit. I think if you're a company just selling products and you have no interest in building a bigger brand, I think that's a different story. But that's kind of my big prediction, and we'll see what happens.
Ironically, if it does happen, you know, it wouldn't be you're given what they're doing with Prime Video and opening up that inventory. It'd be fine. Like they may not at some point,
Yeah,
for the brands at least, it's higher margins, over on the pure ad side. So maybe that's okay. and maybe Amazon just keeps winning. I mean, who knows?
Yeah. But anyway, I got one more bonus for you, James. I think my crazy prediction this year is we're going to get somebody from the trade desk on this podcast to debate with you open web versus walled garden.
Okay, I like it. I sent Jeff Green a note like 6 months ago. We talked to him back in the day with Snap, but he's a lot busier now, I think, than then. But I'd love to have a conversation with them about it because I think there's a lot we probably misunderstand and that the market doesn't quite understand. But again, we also have some friends over there that I respect everything they've done. We're not like trying to knock the trade desk. We're just trying to understand relative valuations better, which is why we had that's why we've had investment bankers on the platform now on the podcast now. And yeah, we're digging. Yeah, we're digging that maybe, and that's one other thing for next year too, which I'm excited about, is that already we have some like amazing guests lined up, and it's sort of broadening out. Like I think one thing that I want to keep learning myself, and I think that like and hopefully people like listeners want to learn about is just like sort of just the broader implications of media in general, like again like media and politics, media in terms of how it can offset margins for other types of businesses, how these businesses are covered and how they're valued. Like there's all these components of like with Super, it's like everything's an ad network kind of thesis. You think about it and it's like ads impact almost like every part of your life, and so we want to kind of dive into parts that we don't understand. So we're lining up people from the commercial real estate industry, healthcare industries. We're going to try to do some deep dives into like other countries, like how these things like work in India and the Middle East and in China. So we got a bunch of cool stuff that we're working on. I think all of it hopefully makes us smarter, hopefully is useful to listeners, and then also I think helps inform kind of our strategy for our own business that we're going to be scaling up quite a bit this year as well. So I'm pumped. I'm shocked by the number of people who have listened to this podcast this year and by the number of people who have been guests on it and taking their time to do it. So I'm very appreciative and thankful of that. And I'm appreciative, Daniel, about how much work and effort you put into doing this. It's probably not surprising if you know the both of us, but like he's very organized and he really makes sure that we're ready to go. So thank you for doing all that, buddy.
Yeah, no, this has been great, James. I'm excited to do this 1 year from now to see how much we got wrong and some of the amazing guests that we've had on in 2024. So excited for next year. Thank you, listeners. We'll be back next week with another episode.